The beauty of childhood lies in its innocence and purity, which is shaped by the love and care of parents. However, many children are not as fortunate to have one or even both of their parents. The sudden loss of parents can destroy a children's life, going as far as developing PTSD. This quote, "Some traumatic events such as the sudden loss of a parent or sibling can dramatically impact the caring environment surrounding the child and can potentially result in a complicated mix of trauma and grief, with both PTSD and complicated grief reactions as a result." This shows us that the loss of a parent causes deep trauma and grief in a child. Children cannot even process this trauma and grief because they are not old enough. They don't know how to process their own emotions yet. As researchers explore the impacts of this event, they have found that the timing associated with the loss of a parent can influence the development of PTSD. Good morning, my name is Daniel Gonzalez, and I'll be presenting the effects of parental absence on children. My research question is, what role does missing a parent play in the development of PTSD in children? And my argument is children have a harder time handling PTSD than adults do. Fear conditioning and early life vulnerabilities, two distinct pathways of emotional dysregulation and brain dysfunction in PTSD, written by Lanius A. Ruth, is an article that discusses different pathways that children can go down. Pathway 1, fear conditioning, stress sensitization, describes emotional dysregulation as an outcome of fear conditioning through stress, sensitization, and kindling. Pathway 2, early life vulnerabilities, views emotions dysregulation as a distal vulnerability factor and hypothesizes of further exacerbation of fear and other emotion regulatory problems after exposure to a traumatic event or events later on in life. Let's take a look at these one at a time. Pathway 1. This pathway explains how emotional dysregulation is caused by stress sensitization, and fear conditioning stress sensitization is when your brain becomes more sensitive to stress over time. This is especially dangerous for children because they are unfamiliar with stress and don't know how to handle it. This may not be as dangerous for adults because they are familiar with stress and have dealt with it before. Pathway 2 explains how having vulnerabilities, handling emotions, can create exposure to problems later on in life. You could think of this as having a bad foundation or no foundation at all, which is exactly what children have, no foundation. Compared to adults, mostly having a good foundation makes handling emotion difficult for children. In fact, when asked, children report a wide range of reactions following traumatic events that tend to cluster around signs of re-experiencing the event, attempts to avoid dealing with the ensuing emotions, and a range of signs of increased psychological arousal. There may be considerable comorbidity with depression, anxiety, and pathologic grief reactions. This quote from the article, "Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder in the General Population and in Children" by William Yule, what makes this article different from others is the way Yule conducted his research. He asked children specifically rather than asking teachers, parents, or coaches, which makes his research unique and have a different perspective. Yule found that children are not connected with their emotions and may re-experience the trauma and have dreams about it, especially within the first few days after the event. Yule even hints how it could be difficult for children to cope. In addition, Yule's quote takes us back to what we saw in Pathway 1 and Pathway 2. This graph from trauma, post-traumatic stress symptoms, and alcohol use initiation in children shows us how children attempt to cope with PTSD and symptoms. This graph shows that 19.9% of total teens consume alcohol have no symptoms, and 23.5% of total teens who consume alcohol have less than 5 symptoms, and almost half of the total teens that consume alcohol have 5 or more symptoms of PTSD. This goes back to what you hinted about children not being able to cope with PTSD. PTSD-induced fear causes PTSD-like changes in the brains and behavior of wild animals is a scientific report from the College Board Stimulus. This discusses the different effects of PTSD in an interesting way. The report examines wild animals, and scientists do this to try to find similar symptoms between animals and humans to create a proper treatment. The graph shows the effects of predator playback in red and non-predator playback in blue. The predator playback induced significantly more fear in the animals than the non-predator playback. We can compare this to humans by saying the amount of fear induced by the predator playback is the amount of fear that children have, while the non-predator playback is the amount of fear that adults have to deal with. One solution is for scientists to keep on working on animals and to keep comparing and trying to create symptoms or create treatments. However, the limitation is that symptoms between the humans and the animals must relate. If they don't, then the treatments will not work. Another solution is for children to talk to their remaining family members. Studies have shown that relationships or cohesion with their family members can have many psychological benefits, one being lower levels of anxiety. However, this can be limited if the child has many family members that have passed, which could restrict them from talking to other family members. Another limitation is that the parent or family member may not be able to properly talk and communicate with the child's trauma and thoughts and feelings. Thank you.
Okay, 2 questions for you. First up, what information did you need that you never could find?
I needed to find information about attachment issues, and it was more difficult to find that.
Okay. And if you had more time, what additional research would you have conducted?
I would conduct more about the different ways that parents have passed. So if they have passed due to war or cancer, how that might affect